Hey, good morning. It's Thursday. It's 10 o'clock. It's time for 10 with Tim. My name is Tim Harris, pastor at Woodburn Baptist Church. I appreciate you so much. Thank you. Those of you who are with me live right now, God bless you. I love the way you just stop your morning and stop and get in the Word with me. Thank you. It's an honor to me. It really, really is. You could do anything at all with the time that you have. And you choose to spend it in the Word with me. So thank you. Some of you are later, and I get that. Most of you join us later, and you're not less important. You probably have a job, right? You can't just be, on your phone or on your device at 10 in the morning every day. That's cool. Whenever you join, you're in the Word too, and you are with us, and we love you. And we love the book of Ecclesiastes. We're in chapter 6. Which is just kind of right in the middle of this great book. It's clear that the preacher, Kohelet, he calls himself, probably King Solomon, we don't know for sure, but Solomon just got one song here, and he just sings it over and over and over. Everything is meaningless, everything is vanity. Under the sun, there's nothing here. And of course, that's the key. And remember that. It's that under the sun perspective that he has chosen. He is speaking as if this life is all that there is. And honestly, if this life is all that there is, then this book, actually sounds a little optimistic. I mean, if this life is all we've got, then my goodness, it really is a sad joke. And that's what he's saying. Now, as I'm reading, especially chapter 6, because in many ways, these 12 verses is sort of the darkest chapter, I think, in the whole book of Ecclesiastes. Just this right here. It's all kind of dark and gloomy and, pessimistic, but still. So chapter 6 is pretty dark. It's true. It's true if your perspective is under the sun, as if this life is all there is. Because if this life is all there is, then the fact that everything ends in death just makes it absurd. It's just not even funny, but it's a joke. If we just live and whatever, we all die and end up, in the same grave, And that's what he's saying. There's another serious tragedy. This is how he starts verse 1. Another serious tragedy I've seen. Well, it's kind of the same one you've been talking. I think it's the same one. But he goes on as if there's this list of disappointments, and all of these lead to these questions for God. And I guess in some ways this is different, but in many ways it's the same thing, you all. He just says, this guy has everything that you need. Just suppose somebody has everything that they need for a good and happy life. They're still not going to have one, That's what he says. The New Living Translation makes this plural. God gives some people, but in Hebrew it's just right. There's a man. Imagine a man who has everything you need for a good and happy life. Well, he's still not going to have one. What you miss, I don't know what translation you're using. New Living Translation is usually pretty good. But in this chapter, it tends to translate the word soul in different ways, so that if I didn't go back to the Hebrew, I would miss how many times that in chapter 6 the word soul occurs. So it's not just verse 3, a man has 100 children. Remember, in the ancient world, to have a lot of children, that's a blessing. So he has a lot of children and a long life, but he still finds no satisfaction in life. That's New Living Translation. But what it says in the Hebrew is his soul is still not satisfied. I think that's significant. And again, I don't know if your translation, if it does use the word soul, I think that's helpful, because I think that word soul is important. It gives that nuance, the idea that there is something inward that is at odds with the ordinary rhythm and the sense of satisfaction that we would find in life. He keeps pointing out the way desire is somehow always greater than satisfaction. Like we just want and want and want. And even when we get what we want, we're still not satisfied. Our soul is not satisfied. So ultimately, I think the message here is that, there's something off about life. There's something that's at odds. There's something that contradicts everything else. And the contradiction is inward. It's in my soul. I love what he says in verse 7, New Living Translation again. All people spend their lives scratching for food. But again, the Hebrew says, all of a man's labor is for his stomach. All of a man's like all your work is for your stomach. All you're trying to do is eat. And you're going to eat and be hungry again. I mean, that's sort of his point. But what he says is, all of your labor is for your stomach, but your soul is never full. Do you see that? So again, I think the way he repeats the word soul here, he keeps going back to the word soul. For me, that helps me understand where the disconnect is. It's inward, it's in me. That's why no matter what happens in circumstances, and this is what Kohelet continues to say, whether you're rich or poor, whether you're wise or foolish, whether you live 100 years or whether, you're stillborn baby, it really doesn't matter, because honestly, it's not any outward circumstances don't seem to bring the joy, the satisfaction that we all crave in life. Now that whole, Kohelet has a number of these better than statements. It'd be better than. And we have one here in verse 3, man, that guy that had 100 children lived a long life, probably better, if he had just been, miscarried. Okay, that's really dark. That's really sad. But there's some truth there. In other words, he's saying, he could have just been stillborn, and that probably would have been better, because then he wouldn't have had to live a miserable life, miserable life. This is a guy that had everything, right? Had 100 kids and, lived long and had everything that you need for a good and happy life, but he just never was, good or happy. Better off if he'd just been miscarried, In other words, if you never find joy and satisfaction inwardly in Christ, and again, I want to preach the gospel to him. If you never find that in Christ, then in many ways, as Kohelet is saying here, your life itself is one long, slow miscarriage. Better if you just, never taken a breath on your birthday. They could have grieved you, but my goodness, he says it's the same thing anyway. If you're stillborn or you live to be, 2,000 years old. And what he says, was that in verse whatever, what if you live to be 1,000 years old twice over? That's what he says. Still better if you've just been stillborn, because your life is just one long, slow miscarriage, because you're still going to end up dead anyway. And then all you got in life was, a whole lot of toil and chasing after the wind. This is Kohelet, it's his whole message. Because if this life is all there is, then there's nothing else to say. And I think finally we're beginning to see that. And again, as dark as this chapter is, I still appreciate it because of the way it begs for the gospel. It just begs. Of course your soul is never filled. That's the very definition of an eating disorder. You're trying to feed a hunger that is not physical. The very definition of an addiction. Those of you who have ever experienced alcohol addiction, it's that continue to quench a thirst that is not physical. And this continues to be what Kohelet points at, but he doesn't know the gospel, so he can't preach the gospel. But oh my goodness, I just want to preach the gospel when I read chapter 6. Verses 10, 11, and 12, again, the same sort of thing that he would say. Everything's already been named. Everything's already decided long ago. Life is, already planned out. It's going to be what it's going to be. And it doesn't do you any good to argue with God. Again, the Hebrew there says, it doesn't do any good to argue with one stronger than you. Again, they're still talking about the Lord. It is strange. Anytime we complain about our lives, ultimately we are complaining against God, because it is God who has given us life in the first place. And often the reason we're so dissatisfied and discontent is simply because we've never really found the purpose for which he made us. Again, I'm kind of wanting to preach the gospel here, which Ecclesiastes always stops short of. But it's just that idea that you complain about your life and ultimately you're complaining against God. And as he would say right here, he's a whole lot stronger than you. He's bigger than you. Your arms are too short to try to box with God. In the few days of our meaningless lives, who knows how our hard days can best be spent? Our lives are like a shadow. Who can tell what will happen on this earth under the sun after you're gone? Yeah. Oh, man. Yeah. You're just going to die. I mean, again, if this is all there is, it don't make no sense. And he keeps saying it. When you're gone, man. Life's going to go on for everybody else. I die. If I died today, my wife's going to get remarried, And I want y'all to help her. I want y'all to introduce her to somebody, and I want y'all to make sure that whoever she marries, he is so ugly. You know what I mean? It's like, I could die today, and I love this church, and I live for this church, and I bleed for this church, Women Baptist Church. But if I die today, man, next week, they'll have somebody else sitting at this desk, And this is the kind of thing that Kohelet, just makes his head want to explode, because you work, and you live, and you love, and you die, and then the world just keeps on turning like you were never here. You know why that is? Because there ain't nothing here. It's life under the sun, and it's sort of like the waiting room for heaven. This is not the deal. Heaven is the deal, and so you can't expect life down here to bring you what only heaven can offer. And again, I want to preach the gospel of the book of Ecclesiastes. It makes you hungry for it, does it not? It makes you just want to go, okay, if the meaning is not down here, then where is the meaning found? And yeah, it's not down here. You got to look higher. Anyway, I'm going to preach, and I need to stop. Chapter 7 has some proverbs. That's where we'll pick up tomorrow. Chapter 7, verses 1 to 29. A little bit longer chapter, but it's a good chapter. Again, the first 14 verses or so are just straight proverbs. Remember I said it's wisdom literature like the book of Proverbs? So we'll pick up right there tomorrow at 10 o'clock, Lord willing, 10 with Tim. Did I say I love you guys? I really do. I appreciate your time on the Word. I love Ecclesiastes. How's it going for you? Don't forget to comment. Give me a smiley face, a thumbs up. Talk to one another. Ask your questions. Tell me what you want to read next. Again, just interact. It's one thing to just sit back and watch this kind of thing on Facebook, but if you interact, it literally changes Facebook, YouTube. It literally changes these social media. They work on algorithms, and the more you interact with the stuff you like, the more of this kind of stuff you'll see. So again, I'm not doing this for my ego. You do it to make these social media platforms better places for all of us. So interact with the stuff you like, and if this is the kind of thing that you like, interact with it, share it, and again, you'll start seeing your daily experience of Facebook change for the better. I love you guys. Have a good Thursday. I'll see you tomorrow.